I wanted to switch 180 over this rail, so after doing a couple ollies over it, I started going for it. Now my biggest concern was not getting enough rotation because I usually pivot him quite a bit, but I quickly found out that that didn't matter as long as I went fast enough to clear the rail. However, I wanted to see if I could still switch heel flips, so after doing a few switch tricks to warm up, I started practicing just a flick in hope of making it easier on myself when I actually started going for it. Now it only took me 4 tries to get my first one, but in trying to get another one, I did a little bit of the splits, flexing my knee a little bit, and that really freaked me out. And it made it really hard for me to try it again mentally, but I kept on skating anyway and eventually got kinda okay at them. However, I gave myself 10 minutes to fakie flip this bank, which I honestly didn't really know if I could do, not only because of how long each try was going to take, but I was also having a bit of trouble getting my flick on my kick flips earlier in the session. However, it was working a lot better on fakie flips, which made me happy. The main challenge that I had to get through was really just getting comfortable trying fakie flips on here, which I was able to do and even kind of get one before the timer went off, but that one was terrible, so I had to give it a few more tries after time to clean it up. This might be the tallest ledge that I've ever 5-0'd, so to warm up I started out doing a few 5-0s and a few 50-50s before trying to get into a 5-0 stall to build up my confidence. Now at first I was having a hard time locking into them correctly because of how tall the ledge is, but I eventually got comfortable with it and was able to get a few good ones before trying to roll. Which was really scary, by the way, because I had this constant fear of not being able to get my back truck up on top of the ledge. Which did happen a few times, but the longer I tried it and the more I told myself to jump high and land into a 5-0, the easier it got. However, I wanted to no slide this pretty tall ledge, so I started out doing some nose stalls to make sure I could get into the nose slide. After that I started going for it. Now it did take me a second to commit to it, but once I did, the next thing I had to do was start going faster to stop myself from sticking, which worked out pretty well until I tried to get a better one and my legs just weren't having it anymore. However, I wanted to see if I could manual 10 parking spaces, so after doing 1, then 3, then 5, I started trying to go for 8. After a little bit of trying it though, I was still having a hard time, so I just decided to go for all 10. Which was when I started trying to bend my knees a little bit more to try to help me hold the manual, and that did help a little bit, but honestly the biggest thing that helped me was just telling myself over and over and over again just to stay centered, and then I could make it all the way because it turned out just to be a mental barrier that I had to break, and that's what helped me do it. I wanted to see if I could pop out of a manual, so after a couple of ollies and ollies into manual, I started going for it. Now I was having a hard time holding the manuals today, but the thing that helped me get the pop out the most was focusing on lifting up my front foot on the way out. That way I could stop slamming my front foot into the ground when I was trying to ollie out. However, I've gotten pretty good at holding manuals recently, so I wanted to see if I could hit a fakie manual across 2 parking spaces. Now the hardest part of all of this wasn't actually holding the manual like I thought it was going to be. It was really just getting into it, since my biggest fear was putting too much weight on the tail, setting it down and launching myself forward. Which to avoid that, I tried to add a little bit more weight on the tail each time I tried it, until eventually I was able to put enough weight on there to lock into a solid enough manual to make it all the way. However, I wanted to start a clothing brand, but not just some YouTube merch thing just for money. I wanted to create something that had a bit more substance to it, which is why every graphic was designed not only to look cool, but have a message in it and a story that comes with it. So hit the shop button if you want to check out the rest of the designs, but if not, go skateboard. I wanted to learn fakie 50-50 big spin out again, so I started doing some fakie 50-50s first to feel out the ledge a little bit, then I started going for it. Now at first I thought it was going to be easier just to go for it instead of just doing some fakie big spins on flat first. Really just because that's how I remember it being, but I was wrong. Partially because there was a bit more fear involved than I remember, so I just look at my board stopping my head and shoulders from turning all the way. But I also had trouble keeping my weight centered, so I slid my front foot up a bit more towards the nose, helping me land in a much wider stance, making the big spin out much easier, which is how I wanted to board slide this down rail. So after warming up with some board slides earlier in the session, I started going for it. Now I knew I was going to have to lean forward a little bit, which is why I was sticking at first because I was doing it too much. Now it didn't take long for me to adjust to lean back a little bit so I could get my first one, but I wanted to get it a few more times to try to get consistent with it. And that's where it got interesting, because I started to get more comfortable on the rail and started to not lean forward much at all. And that made me bail a lot more, but eventually I realized what I was doing and I started to focus on leaning forward more, and I was able to start getting it again. However, I wanted to see how far I could 50-50 on a curb, so without a gram of wax I started going for it. Now I have no clue what kind of paint they put on these curbs, but whatever it is, they grind fantastic. The hard part was really just getting into it. Since the curb is really short, I was having a hard time aiming my trucks to be able to get into the back grind, but eventually I was able to figure out how to do it good enough to be able to grind 2 sidewalk sections. However, I wanted to fakie ollie up a curb, so after doing a few switch ollies, I started going for it. Now, to my surprise, I did it first try, and I didn't have any issues with it, or at least until I found a spot to where I could try it head on. Then I started messing with my head a little bit, partially because it felt like a new thing since going at an angle kind of reminded me of doing a fakie 50-50. But most of the problem was I wasn't getting enough speed, so instead of just hopping on the board, I started running and throwing down, and that gave me enough speed to be able to make it up it. However,